Good morning. Welcome to today's episode in the video series I've been doing here. And if this is your first introduction to this video series, I will simply define for you that the purpose or the central theme in this whole series is taking all of my experience and my conceptual knowledge and understanding of dynamic medicine, the dynamic philosophy that's behind it, and bringing it out into being useful in everyday life. Now, a lot of where we start in these videos is more of a technical definition or a technical example, but the goal in every video that we've done so far is to bring that out into being useful in everyday life, regardless of whether you're a Heilkun's physician or not, or a patient or not, or just a regular person just trying to live your best life. That's what we're doing here in this video series, bringing those concepts out, which will help you do an even better job at that. So this morning's topic, and let me just bring up my slides here. Yeah, in the process, I was earlier this morning, I've been writing a book, and the book is on a particular homeopathic remedy named Staphylos aureus. That's neither here nor there for today's video, but in the process of writing this book, I'm in the middle of writing more of one of the beginning opening sections of the book, which is about really getting into the deeper philosophy of Hahnemann's Heilkunst, his medicine. And specifically what I was working on this morning was talking about the definition of health, which of course, if you have a healthcare system, you sure as heck need a really clear definition of what health is. If you don't have a definition, how on earth do you know if your health system is achieving its goals or not? So again, that's kind of an obvious thing to say, but when you really start to dig down into it and you start to see where a lot of the errors are in allopathic medicine, this is exactly what I'm writing about. So anyways, in writing this section this morning, I thought I would borrow from the book a quote that I'm using in the book. I thought would be kind of useful for our theme this morning. And this quote, I'll just read it. You could see it as well. It's right in front of you, but I'll just read it for the purpose of the audio portion of this. Music is the space between the notes. That was by French composer Claude Debussy. And of course, he had a very uniquely minimalist style. He was a very unique voice in the history of Western classical music. But this is a very especially interesting quote, as it will play into our theme today. And actually, as I say, I am writing this book. I just wanted to note this here. If you wanted to follow my progress on that book, you can sign up here at our website, arcanum.ca/Staphylos aureus. And in fact, on that page, you'll find our original blog post that I wrote, which was on that particular remedy, but that blog post has now become inspiration to write a full-blown book. A many thousand word book is going to come out of this 500 word blog post. But anyways, just to give you the context of why I'm thinking about this today. So we ended up, we'll go back here to our Debussy quote, music is the space between the notes. And what I want to do today is take that theme and unfold it in this broader context of defining health. What is health versus what is disease? How do you treat disease? How do you get somebody to that more complete state of health? And the first thing we have to do, and actually this was part of what I was writing about this morning, is we need to, especially when we come from a scientific framework, and as I've said in some of the previous videos in this series, it's not only healthcare and this form of Heilkunst medicine that we practice, which needs a scientific approach, but in fact, all of us, anyone just living their normal day-to-day life, anyone who is trying to, as I said a moment ago, trying to live their best life, we all need some form of this scientific approach to thinking, to living. As we've talked about in some of the previous videos in this series, you may remember the themes of living thinking or dynamic thinking. That is just one example of this kind of scientific approach to how we approach anything, really, our general life, or the specific topic today, which is going to be defining health. So as I was writing about this morning, and as it says on the slide here, ridding ourselves of any allopathic residues or distortions of truth that we still don't even realize are still at the root of our own mind or our own consciousness. Until we apply the scientific method, we don't realize that we kind of have this false scientific approach that we've adopted, just unconsciously absorbing our culture, absorbing, other definitions of health that we've come across, or what have you. All of this kinds of leaves us in a bad position to approach health from a kind of dynamic perspective, a living dynamic perspective. And so, as I say here on this slide, we want to rid ourselves of those distortions. And what we come to as we start to go into that process is we realize, to the degree we are holding on in our unconscious mind, if we're holding on to any kind of allopathic definition of health, we will be holding on to what I would call a negative definition of health. And by that, I mean, the implicit definition in allopathic medicine of health is that it's simply an absence of symptoms, right? Symptoms equals bad, no symptoms equals good. You get this very oversimplified understanding or definition of health, and that does not really help us where we're trying to go with our more dynamic definition of health. So rather than a negative definition, which is just looking at, does somebody have symptoms or not? If they do have symptoms, the doctor's job is to get rid of the symptoms. And if they do get rid of the symptoms, then the doctor is considered successful, the treatment is considered successful. But as I'm saying, this is all a negative definition of health, and it's very illusory because, yes, when we're in pain or we have some uncomfortable symptom or anything along these lines, of course we want to get rid of it. We don't want to be in pain, we don't want to be uncomfortable. But that's all well and good. That's fine within within that specific purpose of kind of getting out of the pain, getting out of the discomfort. But at the bigger picture, we have to come to understand that if we only stay in that definition, that takes us far afield from what we really want to get to with our definition of health. So as opposed to that negative definition of health, someone having symptoms or not having symptoms, having had symptoms, having got rid of them, all of that, as I'm saying, is just a negative definition. We want to get more into that positive definition where things are not defined in terms of those symptoms being present or absent, having been eliminated or not. But the positive definition we want to come to really links back to a number of themes we've talked about in the previous videos, and I'm going to weave some of those themes together here. So I hope that gives you a little bit more of an insight into what we've been building up all along here. And this positive definition, we get more of, it really gets into the unique individuality of each person. So as I've been saying, whether somebody has symptoms or not is kind of a side question. As I'm saying, it is important in its own right, but it's a side question to where we really want to get to, as I'm saying, with this positive definition of health. So that unique individuality of a person itself becomes its own definition of who we are and what we're meant to be unfolding in the world. As actually we're going to be coming to in a couple of minutes, I'm going to weave back some of the themes from earlier videos, but we're going to see in that positive definition, it's not, or I should say, it is what that person is functionally meant to be and meant to be creating in the world that really starts to give us more of that baseline of what that positive definition of health is. So as we've also talked about in an earlier video in this series, I was making a distinction between wellness and soundness. Now, wellness is a very, very popular word. I was talking about this in the previous video. Just going to quickly recap here. The wellness word is very, very popular and widely used. We have wellness clinics and wellness treatments and wellness health products, wellness sections, of the grocery store or what have you. So wellness is very much related to kind of one side of our health, but it's kind of a secondary thing. It's kind of a secondary phenomenon versus the soundness, which gets to what I was just mentioning a moment ago, is that unique functional individuality of each person when we are, fully activating our soundness, our uniqueness, our purpose in life. That's where that soundness concept comes in, where the example I used in that previous video, when we go to, to our lawyer's office to write out our last will and testament, that cliche at the beginning, it says, being of sound mind and body. What is this sound mind and body? Well, this is this much deeper concept of health. We don't use this word very often in modern English, but this deeper concept of soundness, as I just said, being of sound mind of body, that's what makes your last will and testament legally valid. If you just say to your lawyer, well, I'm feeling pretty well today, that doesn't kind of hold that same legal weight in this sense. And for our purposes, we want to agree with that as well. For our purposes of defining health, we want to be much more grounded in that deeper concept of soundness and not the peripheral concept of wellness. They're both important, but you just have to understand what's at the center here and what is kind of less significance. So that, what I just said, links back to what we talked about last week. And that, if you were here, if you recall, we were looking at those two historical figures of Rudolf Steiner and Wilhelm Reich. And particularly in 1923, at the end of his life, that lecture that Rudolf Steiner gave, which was called The Invisible Man Within. And in this, like in our context here today, we'll link it in this sense, that what he was talking about with that invisible man within, that was pointing to this deeper health concept of soundness. So it's that invisible man, which is kind of implanted within us, which, as I've been saying today, gives us our unique functional identity, our unique purpose in the world. It's kind of that spiritual function that's been woven into us, that we've kind of come to a given lifetime to achieve something, to achieve a certain function in the world, to to create something, to create some form of knowledge in one way or another. That can be an artistic creation, a scientific creation, or just the way that somebody lives their life. They can become an example to all the people around them. So one way or another, this soundness, this deeper inner principle, the spiritual task, really becomes this soundness. And if we go back to that original quote we started from Debussy, of music being the spaces in between the notes, well, that image, that feeling kind of evokes for me what we're saying here. This invisible man is kind of, like the spaces between the notes are kind of that invisible zone, that invisible kind of being of man, which manifests in all of their functional creations, as I'm saying. So as we've also talked about in a previous video, Dr. Hahnemann very much echoed all of this. When you go to his aphorism 9 and 10, and I don't have that in front of me, but I did look at that in a little more detail in a previous video. But precisely in those aphorisms, he's talking about health in the way we're coming to talk about it. Is he's defining more this sense of soundness, where we have this, the reason we have a body and we want it to be healthy, and we have all these healthy functions, as he puts it here in those two aphorisms, is that we want that in order to really activate our higher purpose. As he uses words almost exactly like that. I think the phrase is the higher purposes of our existence. So exactly what I was just saying a minute ago, bringing out this deeper functional purpose that we've brought into our life with us. And this gets us more into this definition of soundness. And I have mentioned this again a moment ago, but this bringing of a unique spiritual task into this life, this is a little bit of a sentiment that we would more literally find in Rudolf Steiner's works. But again, we can weave it through all of these authors and thinkers we've been talking about. I think this really is representative of what we're talking about. So to wrap all this up, I've laid all these pieces out here today. I've linked back to some of the videos from previous days, but we end up with this very distinct idea, a very clear idea, where now where we can start bringing this conscious definition, this conscious idea of health bring it into our own lives, how we understand ourselves, understand, when we're suffering, when we're, not feeling not on track, feeling we're off course in our life in whatever way. Coming back to these basic foundational definitions is a much better guidepost to help you get back onto track, get back onto the path that you're really meant to be unfolding, rather than getting kind of confused or lost in the allopathic definition, which starts to very increasingly frantically trying to get rid of symptoms. It's like shooting at like a duck shoot or something, a video game or anything like that. You're just constantly shooting at the next symptom, the next symptom, the next symptom. Yes, as I said, you may need and want to rid yourself of symptoms, but not as a goal in itself. You say you always want to be aiming that towards this bigger idea of being connected into this deeper spiritual task, being grounded in your soundness, over and above the wellness. As I say, not ignoring the symptoms, but kind of keeping them on the periphery and just really staying locked in to what is this deeper, true identity of who you are and who is that unique person and what is their unique meaning and purpose in the world and unfolding their health. So I'll just leave it at that today. That's kind of the key point I wanted to get to. As I always say, if you want to keep following this series, wherever you're watching this video right now, just continue to tune into that given channel, and the future videos will likewise be published there. And I will see you the next time. And speaking of the spaces between the notes, just a quick little program note. There will be more than a bigger space than usual between this video and the next one. It'll be more than 1 week. We're going to start getting into the holiday season and the break at the clinic. So there will be a gap, but in the name of soundness and healthy living, take that gap as a time to really get deep into your own relaxation, your own rejuvenation. Take in all the themes of these videos, let them work through you. And the next time we see each other, we'll have had a nice gap. We'll have had some spaces between the notes, but that will really enrich the music of everything we've been talking about. So have a good rest of the day, and I will be seeing you soon.